Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel and Happy New Year. Today we're diving into my first impressions of the Canon R5C. It's a camera that's been generating a lot of buzz for its hybrid capabilities. And as a professional video producer myself, I've used a variety of cameras in my workflow, including the Canon C70 and the Canon R6 Mark II. So in this video, I wanted to break down what I like about the R5C, what I don't, and where I think it fits in for professionals like myself. Let's get into it. Let's start with the form factor. The R5C is slightly larger and deeper than the R6 Mark II, thanks to its air intake and exhaust vents, but I actually really like this. The size feels more balanced in the hand and natural to work with, especially during extended shoots. Another standout feature is the top LCD screen. This gives you a quick overview of your settings without having to rely on the rear LCD. It's particularly useful for those low-angle shots where peeking at the main screen is impractical. I found myself really appreciating this design during test shoots, as it cuts through the clutter of on-screen information and lets me focus on exposure settings quickly. The button layout and ability to customize controls is also nice. That's kind of standard with cameras these days, but still very appreciated. However, there is one design choice that I'm not a fan of, and that is the photo-video mode switch. The fact that the off switch is in the middle of these two modes causes a delay when switching between them. And as someone who does a lot of hybrid shooting, this feels clunky and slows me down even if it's just for a couple of seconds. Another small critique I have: when you flip the screen around for self-filming or certain angles, the settings don't reverse until the screen is entirely flipped. This can be frustrating when I'm trying to monitor settings at an in-between angle. I think the Canon C70 handles this more gracefully by reversing the screen settings before it's fully flipped, and I wish Canon had implemented the same thing with this camera. Battery life on the Canon R5C is a significant challenge, especially in 8K, where it just chews through power at an astonishing rate. During my initial testing at 8K, 30 frames per second, a fully charged battery lasted only 20 minutes, and most of that time I wasn't even recording. It's clear that 8K recording is incredibly power intensive, and external power options are almost a necessity. For anyone considering the R5C, I'd recommend looking into solutions like battery grips to double your battery capacity, or an external USB-C power solution, which is actually required to unlock 8K 60 FPS recording. And this is understandable given the processing demands, but it's still a limitation to keep in mind. I think it's frustrating that Canon doesn't include an external power solution in the box, especially when they advertise 8K 60 FPS so prominently. I do want to spend some time talking about 8K because I think a lot of the value proposition of this camera rests on how useful or practical it is to shoot 8K. After reflecting on my typical client projects like weddings, corporate interviews, and promotional videos, I honestly can't think of a scenario where 8K would be necessary. The massive file sizes introduce significant storage challenges that outweigh the benefits for these types of workflows. And while proxies make editing smoother, I still think managing and archiving such large files remains a logistical burden. The severe battery drain further limits its practicality in professional settings where reliability is important. That said, I can see 8K being useful for personal travel or hobbyist projects. In these scenarios where you're not disappointing a client if you run out of battery, having the ability to capture something in 8K that really catches your eye can be a nice bonus. For instance, imagine being on a once-in-a-lifetime trip and shooting an incredible landscape or wildlife moment in 8K. That would be awesome. It's a feature though that feels more suited for occasional personal use rather than day-to-day professional work. While 8K displays and playback devices are still rare, the technology is slowly expanding. There are some TVs and professional grade monitors that do support 8K, and as these devices become more affordable, we could see wider adoption. Shooting in 8K now could be a way to future-proof your content to ensure it remains relevant as technology catches up. Even if you're delivering in 4K, shooting in 8K has its advantages. Downsampled 8K footage often appears sharper and cleaner because the additional resolution reduces aliasing and compression artifacts. The extra detail also results in smoother gradients and more accurate color reproduction. So while most clients won't request 8K, it can definitely elevate the quality of your 4K deliverables. The only real challenge I encountered was importing footage into Premiere. If I imported too many files at once, my computer would freeze, forcing a restart. I found that importing in batches of 20 clips was a good workaround for this. Autofocus is another area where I found the R5C to be a bit disappointing. Even with continuous AF, face detection and tracking, and a compatible lens, the autofocus struggled in several of my test shots. The camera failed to identify my face in pretty straightforward situations, and the performance was far from reliable in video mode. I did find that autofocus performed much better in photo mode, which makes me think this could be a firmware or processing issue specific to video. That said, tweaking the AF speed and AF response settings did help somewhat, but I honestly still felt let down compared to my previous experience with the R6 Mark II, or even the C70 in similar situations. One thing I noticed is that the R5C doesn't provide phantom power, and the mic jack is limited to a 3.5mm audio input. For a camera marketed as a cinema tool, this feels like a missed opportunity. And while I plan to make an extended video on the audio features, I think it's worth mentioning that professional audio workflows might require additional gear to compensate for these limitations. As someone who regularly uses the Canon C70 and the R6 Mark II, I've been comparing the R5C to these cameras to see where it fits in. On paper, the R5C's resolution makes it a better camera, but I don't think resolution should be the primary metric for evaluating cameras. The C70 excels in dynamic range, reliability, and overall video performance. It feels purpose-built for video professionals. Meanwhile, the R6 Mark II is a fantastic hybrid camera with solid autofocus, great dynamic range, and better battery life compared to the Canon R5C. For hybrid shooters, the R6 Mark II just feels more practical. The R5C, on the other hand, feels like it's trying to straddle the line between hybrid and professional video camera, but the compromises like poor battery life and inconsistent autofocus make it hard to recommend over the other two. So where does that leave the R5C? I think if you need 8K recording for specific use cases like high-end commercial work, visual effects, or you just want 8K, it's a fantastic option. But for most professional workflows, I think the drawbacks like battery life and autofocus performance make it hard to justify over more reliable options like the C70 or R6 Mark II. These are just my initial impressions, and I'm planning to dive deeper into specific features in future videos. If you have any questions about the R5C or want me to test something specific, let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and as always, I'll see you in the next one.